Welcome everyone to another episode of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. As always, we're here to keep you up to date on the latest news, tech, content and wisdom from the world of marketing. And as always, my co-host is a man on a mission to demystify digital marketing. The host of the Content Marketing Studio video podcast, please welcome Mr. Pascal Fintoni.
Well, thank you very much. And what a pleasure it is to spend more time with a man who's also on a mission, this time to keep marketing simple. The voice of the Marketing and Finance podcast and the host of the Rocklow video series. I give you Monsieur Roger Edwards.
Oh, thank you so much, Pascal. And here we are with episode 48. So we are definitely steaming straight into episode 50 territory. And it'll only be a couple of weeks before we get there. And we will be telling you very soon what we're going to be doing to celebrate that milestone. But we're not quite there yet, so we've got to fire on and get through this one. So Pascal, shall we go straight into the news?
According to the 2021 Kantar Brands ranking, Amazon has retained its crown as the world's most valuable brand for the third year in a row. Apple is second, Google third, and Microsoft fourth.
And the ad industry is urging the government to reconsider its decision to ban advertising of high-fat sugar and salt products online and on TV prior to 9 p.m, a move expected to cost broadcasters more than £200 million a year in revenue.
Well, Google has backtracked on its plan to ban third-party cookies on its Chrome browser after meeting opposition from UK regulators. The search giant will now not phase out cookies until the end of 2023.
Audi Denmark claims a 70% conversion rate for cookieless test leveraging advertising using exclusion lists, which perhaps suggests that the loss of cookies isn't going to be such a bad thing.
And Marketing Week columnist Mark Ritson recently scooped the prestigious Columnist of the Year award at the PPA Awards 2021.
Secret Cinema has partnered with Netflix to hold a Bridgerton ball in November. The 3-hour immersive experience will revolve around a virtual ballroom with dance classes, life drawing and period-specific games, and a string quartet playing reimagined pop songs.
Wow, well listen to this. Budweiser released a digital game, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 that recreates Bill Pullman's iconic speech in the 1996 blockbuster Independence Day. This one is encouraging people to get vaccinated instead of preparing to combat aliens, of course.
And news platform Euronews is seeking to grow its UK audience with a new Feel Connected to Europe campaign, launched to mark the 5th anniversary of the referendum that saw the UK choose to leave the EU.
Wow.
So Pascal, once again, some really quite interesting news items. I had to include Mark Ritson in the news this week.
Pleased you did.
Because, of course, I've used him as one of my content spotlights many times in the show over the last 48 episodes. And the fact that he's won this award, I just thought it needed to be shouted out. He's not everybody's cup of tea. A lot of digital marketers disagree with what he says because he slags them off quite a lot. But he's always to the point. He's always uses a lot of research in what he's doing. And I find him to be a bit of a breath of fresh air, to be honest.
No, I would agree. I actually looked at the website to see if there was things you could kind of consult. To begin with, it's quite a extensive competition. I mean, the categories, there are quite a few. And Mark was against another 7 shortlisted candidates, all very, very obviously good in their own rights. But it felt, like I said, you've chosen Mark Ritson often for the in the news, even content spotlight. So no, I think it's gone full circle. Well done, you.
And I just wondered what you thought about this issue with the government effectively banning the advertising of high-fat sugar and salt products. I think, yes, we've banned tobacco advertising, cigarette advertising, cigar advertising on TV for many, many years now, and nobody seemed to be too concerned with that. But there was always that sort of glimmer of nanny state, wasn't there? And I just wonder whether this is just going too far. I mean, we're all adults, aren't we? Can we not make the choice ourselves?
Yeah, but the government is reacting to data from the health sector, and it's just not working. Whatever else they've been trying in terms of campaigns and the 5 a day and move more and that kind of things. And I think more importantly, with a year and 3 months of people being more sedentary and being at home, I think the figures will have increased. What I will point out, just as a little kind of jibe at the press. Last week, when we reported this, the value was £600 million a year in revenue. It's now gone down to 200. So maybe things are starting to settle more. My concern will be that the brands that are essentially targeted, we know who they are, can still promote themselves, but what they can't do is show the products. So is it really a part of the solution to your point, or is it just that they'll be vexed, but they could still say, hey, we exist and we are amazing at customer service and people will still buy from them? My challenge, sorry to interrupt you there, Roger, my challenge is that because of my lifestyle, I don't understand or I don't appreciate the correlation between seeing a burger on TV and wanting to buy one. I just think that if you like burgers a lot, you're going to go and buy them no matter the advertising.
Yeah, I would agree. And are we actually trying to solve the wrong problem here? Is it it's the problem that we're advertising high fat, sugar and salt products, or is it the fact that we have high fat, sugar and salt products? Shouldn't these manufacturers be told lower the fat, lower the sugar, and lower the salt, and then they would be healthier, and then we would be able to advertise them, and presumably everybody would be happier, wouldn't they?
Well, that's what they've been trying to do for, it feels like it's the conversation's been going on for decades, because on one hand they say reduce the salt, they say, well, people like salt, reduce the salt, it costs money, and this is back and forth between regulators and manufacturers. I know that things have improved somewhat, but clearly the UK government, but also across Europe, they are very concerned about the fact that the body is not able clearly to deal with this high content of fat, sugar and salt.
Yeah. So thinking about Bridgerton, now I know that you're not a Netflix person, are you,
am
Pascal? Not. So you won't have seen Bridgerton, but you might have heard of Bridgerton. It was the sort of rom-com set in the past, sort of Regency England, big costume drama, very well produced, a little bit cheesy, quite a lot of sex, and obviously a massive, massive hit. There's a second series coming, I believe, and no doubt that will be just as big a hit. But this secret cinema initiative with the virtual ballroom sounds really quite interesting and innovative to me.
And can I just check because for me, the campaign that they're doing, which I would agree is a multifaceted and very innovative, it feels as though it should attract a younger audience. There's quite net savvy, and I'm making obviously the link between Bridgerton and what you described to an older audience. So have they actually successfully attracted a younger audience despite the subject matter and the time?
It's a very interesting question. I mean, a lot of the characters in Bridgerton are young characters, albeit dressed in period costumes and wandering around period London. But I think that they've made it in such a way that it definitely would be attractive to young people. And I guess that this campaign will build upon that. I imagine that the string quartet playing reimagined pop songs, it won't be reimagined pop songs from our era of the 1980s. I guess it'll be reimagined pop songs from the noughties.
I wanted to quickly mention, because it's appeared in the news quite a bit, about this Google thing and the cookies and some more about food, really. So when you look into it, the internet is trying to be safer and more private, whether that is search engine and social media, and we can discuss here now whether or not they are being successful. So when the news was first announced by Google, that's what we're doing, the reaction was initially, oh, good on you, thank you very much for helping make the internet safer and more private. But then when people looked into the details, what Google are offering is to ban everybody else's cookies apart from theirs. Hence why the UK regulators are not happy.
Indeed, and again, it's a bit like going back to what we were saying about the food, isn't it? The problem isn't that there's advertising of the high fat, high sugar, high salt. It's the fact that there are those products that exist, and this is the same issue, isn't it? Is it really fair for Google to take this position when really what it's doing is it's lining its own pockets by making it more difficult for everybody else to do advertising? So there is a major smattering of hypocrisy there, I think.
Absolutely.
So, Pascal, I think we should probably move on, and the next section of the show is always a favourite. Let's move on to Content Spotlights. In this section of the show, Pascal and I bring to the table a piece of content. It could be a video, it could be a blog, it could be a bigger article in a news magazine, and we effectively look at that piece of content and discuss its merits. So, Pascal, what have you got for me this week?
So this week I've got a video for you, and I've gone back. If memory serves, I've mentioned filmcourage.com before in Content Spotlights. As a reminder, this is a initiative, a movement, you could argue, to help people be better screenwriters, better film producers, but the lessons for content creators in the business world are very relevant. Filmcourage.com should be approaching the 10th anniversary. The co-founders are Karen Warden and David Braneen. And this video has the following title: If you can't answer these 6 questions, you don't have a story. And the interviewee was Glenn Gears, who had 25 years experience as a screenwriter for TV, movie, and play, stage. And I am a sucker for anything to do with storytelling. I never tire of hearing someone's perception and position on it, because I just think that it is at their heart to be able to write a good press release all the way to writing a Hollywood blockbuster. Now, what is interesting about Glenn Gears is just a very kind of natural guy. There's nothing fancy, there's nothing kind of jargony. He just explained plainly, which I think is at the heart of telling a good story, and simply what it means to have a story that engages. So I'm going to give you quickly his definition of a story, then move on to the 6 questions and get your reaction. But something tells me that you're going to thoroughly enjoy this summary. So for Glenn, story is about someone that we can relate to. You don't actually like them, you can relate to them, that is trying to accomplish something, and their efforts are either helped along or hindered by others. And their interaction and reaction to those obstacles is at the heart of any stories. So what he's saying is, in the video you'll hit when you watch it, someone just wants to board a train, but if they just go from the car, as you would perhaps sometime, Roger, to the platform, to the train, then get to their destinations, there's just no story. There was no interaction, even with maybe the staff working at the station. Maybe there was no obstacle. Has he or has she forgot their suitcase in the car? You've got all the kind of things you put into it. So really, a story becomes interesting before you even know what a story is, when there's something that potentially is getting in the way or something that is helping along. And we enjoy observing how those relatable but perhaps not likable characters react with those obstacles or with those champions helping them along. So I thought that was just an interesting reminder. I just love them. So in terms of the writing process, whether once again it's a press release or a case study or an award-winning TV series, it is about you in advance answering a number of questions, jotting down some notes, and then expanding upon. And you've got to find, of course, your own writing process, and the video should spend some time on that. But start with an overall vision, of course, of the story. Then ask yourself this question: who is it about? What do they want? Why can't they get it? And what do they do about it that they haven't done before? Why is it not working? And how does it end? That's all. These are the 6 questions you've got to answer. Put them on a piece of paper and jot down some answers. And here's the thing. Each time you come up with an answer, if you want to expand and flesh out the story, just answer the question, why? So if you ask, who is it about? And you describe a person, then ask yourself the question, why are they who they are? Why do they have this profession? What has happened in the past? What's happening in the future? What do they want? But why do they want it? Why can't they get it? And you can really start to flesh out. You can do a mind map, you can do post-its, you can do what you want. And literally what he was saying is that by answering those 6 questions, Roger, it fit in a 1-act story structure, 3, which is my favorite, as you know, or even 5, 7, 21 story structure. I just think it's just a wonderful reminder, and one that made me smile when I was listening to it, because once again, I just enjoy hearing about storytelling.
This is fantastic, and you know that I'm a massive fan of stories as well, and we talk about films and all the stories within those, but storytelling is so powerful in marketing, and storytelling is so powerful in business. And actually, this week I was reminded of this whole thing. It's a little bit insurance-y just for a moment, but there was an article in the Sunday Times last weekend which was slagging off life insurance. Now, a lot of people find life insurance intolerably dull anyway, but this article was really badly written. It was basically saying never ever buy it, and that's not a good thing, because, people need to have that sort of insurance, especially if they've got a mortgage or big outgoings. And there was quite a great big sort of response to this in the financial services community. And one guy actually said, stories are the way to overcome this sort of article. We just need to tell stories about people who've had payments and have been saved financially. And this reminded me of an article that I wrote, Pascal, and this was 10 years ago. And it's one of the very first blogs I ever wrote on my own website. So I went back, it took me a while to find it actually. I've done so many posts since then, and I reposted it and then effectively associated it with this guy who said stories are the way to do it. And this blog post has just gone ballistic again, and people, this is just an amazing story, and it's one of those stories that can actually make people cry, and it's come back, and there you have it, the power of stories, something that I did 10 years ago. The story is so powerful, it's still relevant 10 years later, and that just goes to show. And if I went through, and I'm not going to because we haven't got time, but if I went through those 6 questions in that story that I posted 10 years ago, I'm probably sure that all of those 6 questions would have been included within that.
Oh, indeed. And I'm very aware that in some circles in kind of industry and business, the moment you use the term storytelling, people start rolling their eyes. It's a bit like using the term authentic.
Yes.
Come on. But please understand, the term storytelling is just a label for actually what I've just described a moment ago. And as said, you can, with these questions, you can write a movie, a video game, a series, a press release, a case study. You can plan a course potentially. It's just wonderful. And more importantly, these are the kind of questions and the system that's been around for a very long time, which is why it can be trusted.
Fantastic. So, Pascal, shall I tell you about my content spotlight?
Please, yes.
This is actually a mainstream media article, which may be the first time that I've actually done this. So this is an article that appeared in The Guardian, on the Guardian newspaper website. The heading is, "The problem isn't remote working, it's clinging to office-based practices," by 𝗪𝗓𝗂 𝗵𝗵 at the Guardian newspaper. And this caught my eye because a lot of people obviously are talking about the new normal, which is another big cliche, isn't it? As we move out of lockdown, people have become comfortable with working from home, those of us who can, and don't want to face the prospect of having to go back to the commute to the office every day. And, those people in London who used to put up with, hours of commuting each day on crowded and very expensive trains and staring into somebody's armpit on the tube train every day, just misery. And you can understand why they don't want to go back to this. And it would appear that business is going to accommodate that. And you hear talk of, you may only have to go into the office 1 day a week or a couple of days a week, and you can work from home fine because we've got used to it using Zoom and Teams during the lockdown. But this article digs a little bit deeper into this and saying it's all very well saying, let's allow this remote working and flexibility to continue. But what 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is doing in this article is actually challenging the entire office-based philosophy, the methodology, and saying that's not enough. Because if you think about it, the term remote working suggests that going to the office is the actual done thing and that everybody should go to the office. And what she's saying is, hasn't the pandemic shown us that actually we might not need offices at all? And therefore remote working is a misnomer because it might not be remote working. And so what she does is she goes through only 3 things that really hark back way into history to prove to me and others that actually this whole way that we've been working has been exposed by the pandemic to be completely hopeless. So the first thing is, the office, based in a big city, very expensive rents and rates and all of that sort of thing, and the needless backwards and forwards and expensive commuting. And, why do we do that? Well, that's because back in time that they wanted workers to be in an area that they could be controlled and that they could be managed. It maybe even goes way back to Henry Ford and his car production lines. And the 9 to 5 philosophy of the office is just nonsense. If you are virtual, then it doesn't need to be 9 to 5. It could be whatever hours you need to put in. And give people the flexibility. And should it become more about the results as opposed to the time? So yeah, you can sit in your desk and stare into space from 9 to 5 and not actually produce anything. And she also challenges the whole meeting culture. The fact that we go into all of these meetings in meeting rooms day in, day out, that create other meetings, And really, the pandemic has just perpetuated that whole thing virtually. And I talk to a few of my friends who work in big corporates still, and they're saying that they are attending 50% more meetings than they used to do when they were actually going into the office, because it's made it easier to have even more pointless meetings. So what 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is saying is, A, challenge the fact that you need an office at all. Secondly, challenge the fact that we should work 9 to 5. And third, try to move on from this whole meeting-based philosophy. And she ends the article by saying, look, imagine that we didn't have offices 9 to 5 and meetings, and we genuinely had the ability to recreate work from scratch. What would it look like? Because at the moment, we're just effectively virtualizing something that actually wasn't working in the first place.
Fascinating. Just taking your last sentence, to take something that exists in the physical world and just do a virtual version takes me back to the early years of websites. When people say, well, I've got a brochure, printed brochure, let's do the same online, as opposed to actually imagining all the things that you could do in addition to, and for me, it all begins with language. I'm getting a little concerned with this term of hybrid. As you know, we mentioned that last week. I saw an article on LinkedIn talking about the third workspace, whereby essentially you've got the office, you've got home, and then you've got something else, suggesting that it's third in line, as opposed to, so you've got all that. So I think she's definitely hitting the right mood, because I spent 3-4 years of my life, my early career as an architect, commute to London, an hour and a half each way, train, standing up all the way, even though I paid, full ticket, then bus and then tube and whatever. And I just couldn't do it again. And I have complete sympathy with people doing it. But then I remember when people would open business centres in other parts of the UK, but they would still need to have an address in London, because that's where the meetings took place. And also people say, well, if we don't have the London address, we're not going to be as trusted as if we have a Manchester or Newcastle or Edinburgh address. And I'm hoping that this has gone by the by. But then we still have, as you say, historically, where people work in factories, and therefore you have to descend en masse to that venue. And I think when we move to manufacturers, to the service industry, we retain this habit of descending en masse towards a big venue, a big building, and taking our place at the computer instead of the operating machines. And she's right to challenge coming onto. Hasn't the year and a bit that we've spent been the ultimate experiment and the ultimate way to gather evidence that there are different ways? And if you think about it, the software developer community has proven that you have multinational teams working in different parts of the globes, and they use online to meet, but then to get on with the project and accomplish great results for their clients, but they don't have an office to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'd be really interesting to get your views on this, listeners and viewers of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. Are you heading back to the office now? Are you going back to the way it was? Let us know what you think. Either give us a comment on the YouTube video, or look us up on Twitter and tell us what you think. Tell us what you think of this whole remote, in inverted commas, working debate. So, 𝗓𝗂𝗂, thank you so much for that article in the Guardian newspaper. Really did make me think. Pascal, I think we should move on now and talk about marketing, tech and apps. Well, in this part of the show, Pascal and I review apps that we've come across, platforms that we've come across, technology that will help us do our jobs better. So, Pascal, what have you got for me this week?
So this week, it's all about a research project I kind of gave myself, auto-commissioned, an investigation around audio live streaming. Now, you'll know we've spoken about Twitter Spaces, have plans. I've looked into the Spotify Green Room. We know that the alleged Facebook Audio Room is now a reality, being rolled out in the US, and we know enough that LinkedIn is bound to do something of the same ilk. So I've been thinking, and I've been kind of almost practicing what I preach about planning, about researching, about business casing it, saying, well, what is the benefits of audio live streaming, and if I was to go ahead, in what format? And I realized that there were some shortcomings of the options given to us, albeit we shouldn't complain because Roger is free of charge. I mean, it's pretty incredible. Yeah. But Twitter Spaces, Spotify Green Room and the others, I'm seeing something in the realms of, so you go live once and then it's over. People can't find the audio recording within the platforms to play again because it's gone, and you can't find a way to share it. You can't find a way to repurpose it. Now, some say you will be able to get access to an audio recording, but we don't know yet the quality of that recording. I'm thinking, so is there something else, or is there something that I could use in addition to all that? And through, frankly, using Google, I was reminded of one platform and discovered a new one that has essentially the audio live streaming as an option that gives you a bit more control. So the first one is called 𝗵𝗲, M-I-X and then 𝗲, and I've got the hyperlink in the show notes. I want you to think of a almost like a podcasting platform, but you can have more control in and around creating a live experience. So you can use it from desktop or mobile phones. You could be out and about and actually start an audio live streaming. You will have a dedicated page on 𝗵𝗲 that you can share the hyperlink to, but which is where, for me, is more interesting. You can also embed the player for people to listen live or listen on replay on your own website. And now we start to go back to what I'm more comfortable with in terms of content marketing and building your reputation. So you can promote, obviously, the live session in advance, set reminders. People can download, obviously, the hyperlink and so on. And you can choose to make it public or private. And you can also add pre-recorded content, such as, for example, Roger, music. So you could have your intro music. You could have some stings. You could have some pre-recorded adverts. You could even add, as part of your kind of deliberation, content from another speaker, of an advert on TV, whatever you need to really make this a great live experience. Now, 𝗵𝗲, from what I can gather, would allow you to create more of a solo show, which is fine. Now, if you want to have guest, co-host, even listeners that can jump in the call and talk to you, then you may want to look into Podbean. I have a live stream version. Now, I must confess, Roger, I thought Podbean was just for podcasting as we understand it. And I've never bothered beyond knowing that it exists amongst all the others. But as part of my research, I discovered that they've had a live streaming function for quite some time, in fact. So all the things I've listed with 𝗧𝗵𝗲 exist, but then this is where you can invite co-hosts, so you can have essentially more than one person delivering the presentation live to your audience. But you can also have listeners that can jump into the call, almost like a radio show. And they also have this lovely feature where people can give you virtual gifts if they appreciate all the hard work you put in. And again, you have the player, which can be embedded. Of course, because Podbean is a podcast platform, you will have a recording that you can share on. And I've been wondering whether, in a way, Twitter Spaces and Spotify Green Room, they have almost a particular use case, but with its limitations. And if audio live streaming is for you, then 𝗧𝗵𝗲 and Podbean could be the option. And for people that are still not sure what this could look like, I want you to imagine using YouTube for live video, which is an option, as opposed to pre-recorded content that you then upload on YouTube. This is essentially the difference.
Yeah, this whole audio thing's really interesting, isn't it? Over the last few days, I've heard a few gurus saying that social audio is going to be the next big thing, is going to be massive. Clubhouse, as you've mentioned, Twitter Spaces, Spotify Green Room, all of that. It's just going to go all gel together and become gigantic. And it just makes me... I've always been a massive fan of audio, as you know, why I've done the podcast for so long and why I was so keen to work with you on this one. But it wasn't long ago that people were saying that by 2021, 90% of content or 80% of content that we consume will be video. Whereas now everybody seems to be saying, no, it's actually going to be audio. So, yeah, very interesting to see where this whole audio versus video is actually going to go.
Quite, no, absolutely. So I'm going to continue the research. If I come across other apps and other solutions for audio live streaming, I shall share them with you. But what wonders have you found on the interweb, Roger?
Well, this is a bit random, actually, this week, because I haven't got a theme like you have. Now, in Edinburgh, this week, we have the opening of the St. James Quarter, which is this gigantic shopping, entertainment, hospitality and retail complex. It's been being built for 5 years, and it's taken longer because of the pandemic for obvious reasons. And they originally demolished this horrible 1960s blot on the landscape concrete monstrosity that was there before, and they've turned it into actually something that really fits in quite nicely with the architectural style of Edinburgh, except right in the middle is this building which is ultimately going to open as a W hotel, but the architectural name for this building is the Golden Ribbon, and it sits in the middle of this development, and it effectively is now a new landmark on the city skyline of Edinburgh. And obviously this thing has gone down very Marmite with people. People tend to either utterly hate it or really quite like it. And people say it looks like the poo emoji. In fact, I've heard people call it the golden turd. Am I allowed to say that on the podcast? And other such derogatory terms. But I've done a vlog about this building, and I was editing it over the last couple of days, and I realised that I needed the poo emoji to put it into the video. I mean, such is the life that we lead here, the excitement that we have in our content creating lifestyles. And so, of course, I had to go and look for a decent file of the emoji, the poo emoji.
Could we ask what such term you use on Google for that?
Poo emoji, actually. And I think I actually said poo emoji for Premiere Pro, I think I actually typed in. And I came across this website called Emoji Island. And would you believe it, but every single emoji that you can have on your iPhone, on your Android, whatever it is, and there's hundreds of them now, you can download for free the ping file for these emojis. So I've got the poo emoji, but I also ended up downloading the thinking face and the roll eyes and all of that sort of thing. Now, they do make their money by selling vector files for these emojis as well, and I think you pay $2.95 for the vector file, and obviously the vector file gives you more creativity, and you can make it bigger or smaller without losing any of the definition. But just for a very brief pop-up on the screen of the poo emoji, I was quite pleased with finding Emoji Island. And the second piece of tech is totally unrelated. And I just came across, I've heard about this before, but this is the first time I actually came across the actual app on the App Store. And it's called 1 Second. In fact, the website is 𝗏𝗏𝗲.co, and it's a 1 second a day video diary. And that's literally what you do. You're only allowed to take 1 second of video every day. And this app stitches it all together and makes a continuously growing in length film of all these seconds of your life. And if you actually look into it, there are some people who, believe it or not, have been using this app for nearly a decade now. And looking at some of the videos that have been posted, it's really, really quite fascinating. It's, that such a quick glimpse, but you suck in so much of the experience of people. And actually looking at them, I'm sort of thinking, wow, I'd love to have done this for the last 10 years to actually see all the instantaneous snapshots of the life. It's just slightly different to photos, isn't it? It's just a second of video, so there's always a bit of movement, always a little bit of zooming in, zooming out, real life. I just think it's absolutely fascinating, so I may well be starting to do a second a day video diary myself.
Oh, I'm very tempted too, Roger. Interestingly, when I began my journey to discover whether or not filmmaking was for me, I attended, as you can imagine, a lot of film courses and film festivals. And one of the festivals, a guide recorded a year of his life with 5 seconds clips, which, if you sit down in a screening room and you watch, and what was fascinating, which I think is a case with 1 second, it does actually work as a narrative. You actually can keep up with what's going on. And I think with our use of the internet, we can now cope with the 1 second information. But literally, this guy was working, then he had an injury running, I think, and so you could see him trying to recover. Then he went running again, but he wasn't well enough, so he got himself hurt a second. So you had all this emotion around this character who was just recording 5 seconds of of his life per day, and then screening it. So if you think 1 second, so literally in the space of maybe 5 to 6 minutes, you could summarize the entire year. That could make for a wonderful yearly roundup for a business as well, couldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, businesses, if they showcase their products, showcase their staff, the experience, their locations, I think it's a really interesting idea. And I'm sort of a little bit upset that I've never really embraced it before, because I have been aware of it. I just haven't actually downloaded it and given it a try.
Superb.
So a lot of these apps and platforms that we rely on today wouldn't be possible without endeavours from the past. So it's time to fire up the flux capacitor, set the controls of the TARDIS. We're going to head back in time for This Week in History.
And in 1877, the All England Croquet and Lawn Tennis Club begins its first lawn tennis tournament at Wimbledon, then an outer suburb of London.
In 1936, several US patents were issued for the Phillips head screw and the screwdriver to its inventor, Henry F. Phillips.
Well, in 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield, RAAF, issued a press release stating that personnel had indeed recovered a crashed flying disc from a ranch near Roswell.
Goodness gracious. In 1960, President Dwight D. Eisenhower and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev trade verbal threats over the future of Cuba.
In 1977, Voyager 2 passed by Jupiter nearly 2 years after it's launched. It will become the only spacecraft to study all 4 of the solar system's giants before entering interstellar space in 2018.
In 1985, the Coca-Cola company makes one of the worst decisions in marketing history when it decides to change its original formula and introduces a new Coke.
And in 2007, the 7 wonders of the modern world are announced. Roger, they are the Great Wall of China, Jordan's ancient rock city Petra, Brazil's statue of Christ Redeemer, Machu Picchu in Peru, Mexico, Chichen Itza Pyramid, and the Colosseum in Rome. Finally, India's Taj Mahal.
And in 2009, after more than 5 years in beta, Gmail finally gets out of beta. Well, do you agree with the 7 wonders of the modern world, or would you have included anything else in there? I mean, should the golden ribbon from Edinburgh replace one of the 7 wonders of the modern world that you've just read out?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I don't find them as exciting. I mean, they are, they're part of history, and particularly when you move into South America. But I find the wonders of the natural world far more exciting and to kind of gasp at. But yeah, I think it's interesting because that was the position in 2007. Will the list change in 20 years' time, 40 years' time, where things that are deemed to be more current are going to become more historical?
And indeed, I'm thinking about the Roswell thing. Now, whether there was a real flying saucer involved in this or not, whatever you might say and whatever your beliefs might be, and however many conspiracy theories you've read, you can't argue that this event, whatever it was, has created so much content over the years, from films, TV series, conspiracy theories, articles. So just that one press release effectively started a chain reaction of content creation.
Talk about rocking the pond. And do you think that for the press release, they use the storytelling technique that we reviewed in Content Spotlights?
Well, there's a very good question there. And of course, I wasn't born in 1960, but I still remember my parents talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis and the fact that we came so close, almost to nuclear Armageddon, didn't we, in 1960? And I grew up late 70s, early 80s, and there was still quite a lot of nuclear fear around about that time.
Oh, quite.
And I always remember those adverts, if you hear the air attack warning, you and your family must take cover. And I remember as a child being absolutely traumatized by the thought of nuclear war.
I was the same. I mean, France, we lived in Paris at the time because the Cold War went on for a very long time. For viewers and listeners who are perhaps from a younger age, younger generation, you may not appreciate because verbal threats now are so commonplace. But back then, this was serious stuff. And even on French TV, they would tell us, well, if this happens, do this and whatever. And this was only, give or take, 15 to 10 years after the Second World War. So there was also a whole generation of people who have gone through that war and they didn't want to go back to it, particularly with the nuclear threats.
Yeah, I just have still can remember having nightmares as a child. So Coca-Cola, interestingly enough, Pascal, when I was younger, I was a Coca-Cola fiend. My parents actually used to get crates of Coke delivered because we used to drink so much of it. And I can even remember when I started working, there was a little trolley lady came round every day selling sweets and snacks, and I would get a can of Diet Coke in the morning and a can of Diet Coke in the afternoon. And it's probably coming up to about 10 years, I was in Spain. We were in Mallorca one summer, and I decided to stop drinking Coca-Cola when I came back from that holiday, and I haven't had a can of Coke in nearly a decade, and I'm sure I've benefited from not drinking it. But I don't think that I ever tried the new version of Coke before they effectively re-established the old version. Or if I did, I didn't like it, and I kept drinking Coke Classic, which is what they called the old version for a while.
Yeah, I didn't like the new Coke like you. I was almost brought up on the original one. Interestingly, for me, memory of drinking Coke was given to me whilst I was in hospital. So when I was much younger, I was age 6, I had cancer and went through the treatment. And when you would give you chemotherapy, you just felt so unwell that actually to perk you up, they would give you a glass of flat Coke. And that sugar boost and I think everything else, that all the nasty stuff that is in it, made me feel so much better that I've always associated, which actually is how it began. If you remember the history of Coke, it began as a remedy It was
Yes.
based on that. So for me, Coke was always, you drink it if you're not well. And guess what? If I have a bit of a down day, if my hay fever is really, kicking my friend's butt, then a glass of Coke, which I have. I mean, I have the glass bottles. I'm very traditional in the fridge.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, it was a remedy. It was the early Lucozade, wasn't it? Once again, great stories from history. And again, a lot of everything that we do today is shaped by these pioneers and these stories from the past. So let's move on now, Pascal, and celebrate the work of some content creators from in and around our networks. Shall we move on to creator shout-outs? In this part of the show, Pascal and I celebrate the work of content creators, mainly from inside our network, sometimes from outside. So, Pascal, who is in your sights this week?
So I want to actually celebrate the work of a group of people led by Andrew Wilson and Lindsay Morrison and the team at People Power. People Power is more than just an event, although that's taking place very soon this year. It's literally a movement around supporting people who want to be modern thinking, forward-thinking leaders. They work on themes like innovation, well-being, team building, and so on and so forth. And over the last few years, they have amassed an incredible resources, which you have on their official website, link in the show notes. And in this blog, you're going to find interviews, you're going to find articles around everything you would want to explore and reflect on as part of being a successful and really inspiring team leader. And I think with regard to our earlier comment from Content Spotlight and more, Roger, the last 12 months, if not beyond, have been challenging for not just individuals in general, but also for team leaders. And the good ones have risen to the occasion, wouldn't you say? So I just wanted to kind of give Andrew and Lindsay and the team a shout out for the work that goes on behind the scenes, not just for the events, although they are brilliant, but also for gathering the information before events, during events, and after. So you'll have articles and videos on subjects like colleagues as customers, taking a marketing mindset to create an impactful employee experience, which I think is spectacular. Why top coaches are using emotional intelligence and why you should too. Personalizing performance management, and so on and so forth. Just very practical, easy to follow interviews, videos, and articles that just help you as a team leader feel perhaps less isolated at this moment in time, but also inspired to always do the right thing for your people.
It's really good. And actually thinking back to the content spotlight I did today about the future of working, this whole thing, this people-centered thinking has got to be the way forward. And hopefully thinking some of the issues that these guys talk about on their blogs and their video series, it's interlinked, isn't it, to all this debate we're having about the future of work. So really interested in that, and I shall give it a look. Let me shout out Mr. Mark Masters this week. Do you know Mark?
I do not. I don't think so.
No. Mark Masters runs it was a conference. It's called You Are the Media. Quite a big marketing conference based in Bournemouth. And Bournemouth was the city I had my very first ever job when I left university, just as a bit of trivia. And Mark's company, You Are the Media, has quite a big reputation on the UK marketing conference circuit. It was certainly up there with Youpreneur and the Content Marketing Academy when it was around. Now, of course, Mark has been hit, like everybody else has been hit, by the pandemic and hasn't been able to run any events since. He's done some virtual lunchtime spots over Zoom, but obviously, like all of us, he's not been able to run an in-person event. And yesterday, Mark ran an in-person event for the first time in 16 months. The You Are the Media return to the event circuit. Now, I was privileged to be involved in this, not as a speaker per se. What he did is he invited a few people to just turn up virtually, because this was a in-person and virtual hybrid event. Now, I know that you're not massive keen on the word hybrid, but he absolutely pulled this off, Pascal. He invited a number of us from around the country just to pop on for 5 minutes each, just to say a couple of things about what we've been doing during the lockdown and give a marketing tip and that sort of thing. But he had a theatre booked out in Bournemouth. So there were real people sat in that theatre, and I spotted John Asperian in the actual audience. I could see him sat there, so that was one person I recognised. Matt Desmere was there, who's also been a creator shout-out on the show. And then he had the world's biggest Zoom screen, effectively, in this theatre. And he invited people like myself and others, Ella Orr was in there as well, appearing on this screen. And actually, Pascal, he pulled it off, and I genuinely felt as if I was at a live event, even though I was sat exactly where I am now, sitting in front of my computer screen. Mark's energy on the stage with his microphone was absolutely intense. You know, he was ebullient, he was a bit shouty and so enthusiastic, and he also had John Burkhart there as well, who's quite a famous conference speaker who does weird things like drinking games on stage and stuff like that. And there I was, and I'm thinking, wow, this is actually working. He's pulled this off. It was an absolutely genuine in-person and virtual event, and I think that given the feedback that he's had, and this was only yesterday, by the way, he's actually going to do it again. It's going to form the staple of his events going forward. So that's the first example I've come across of a genuine hybrid in-person and virtual event.
Super. Well, to be honest with you, I feel like I've missed something exceptional. So do let me know for the next one, and we'll go together.
Yeah, I think the next one's going to be in September, and I believe the guest is Joe Paluzzi, who is quite a famous content marketer. So we'll keep you up to date on when that's going to be. So, Pascal, we finally reached the most important part of the show. Is it the most important part of the show? Well, it's often the most memorable and the most enjoyable part of the show. It's time for film marketing. Way back in 2008, Cloverfield was released, and it was a pretty big blockbuster film, found footage blockbuster film, all about an alien invasion. And that's not the film we're going to be talking about in film marketing today. We are going to be talking about the sequel to Cloverfield, but actually the sequel, which was called 10 Cloverfield Lane, was a sequel that nobody really ever heard was coming, and in some respects nobody really expected it, and maybe that was part of the appeal. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a very daring thing to do. So to begin with, you've got to applaud the creators for keeping it a secret for nearly 2 years, because production started in 2014, was finished 2014. Then this movie, as we're going to hear in a moment, was released in March 2016. So what happened in 2015? Well, we know that the production company Bad Robot, with J.J. Abrams behind at the helm with his co-founder, maybe was a little busy with this thing called The Force Awakens.
No, you're absolutely right, Pascal. You couldn't let 10 Cloverfield Lane get in the way of a good Star Wars movie, could you?
No, absolutely. So, I mean, I've seen Cloverfield. I went to it at the cinema, but there was a big build-up, and I was so excited. And the movie surprised us greatly, because the marketing campaign in 2008 kept so much as a secret. You know, even though you watched a trailer, even though you went online to glean more information, the movie surprised greatly. And the same is true for this one. But did you remember seeing 10 Cloverfield at the movies, or did you wait for the DVD Blu-ray release?
We waited for the Blu-ray release, and I'm not sure how I feel about this film, Pascal, because it felt to me at the time as if I'd been conned a bit. I was just expecting a proper sequel, you know, with monsters, and the original film was you know, handheld footage type found film, and really quite fast and exciting with lots of jump cutting. This film, it just felt to me as if they'd taken a different story about a creepy guy who kidnaps a girl and hides her in a nuclear fallout shelter, and they've added this sort of Cloverfield bit on to capitalise on the original film, which is probably correct, actually. It's probably what they did. So I just felt a little bit short. I'm not saying it's not a good film. It's an incredibly good film. And, it's tense, it's exciting, it's creepy as well. And, there's real jeopardy involved. But, we're saying that it was a sequel that nobody was expecting. I just still wonder whether it's genuinely a real sequel or not.
Well, indeed, the film directors, producers, J.J. Abrams, never confirmed nor denied that it was a sequel, keeping obviously the word-of-mouth marketing going, is it or is it not? And eventually during the interview, I think he used the term, 10 Cloverfield Lane is like a blood relative to Cloverfield. So not the sequel, but part of the same universe, and obviously setting up a franchise. I mean, for me, I went to the movies and I was so taken by the experience of three people trapped in an underground bunker. John Goodman, who was truly frightening. I mean, the man, which who I know mostly for comedy, was so sinister as the unhinged kind of preppy, I think they called on their preppers. And obviously, you had the actress Elizabeth Winstead, who plays Michelle, who gets a lot of his attention. And we have the third character, Emmett, who we learned through the story has helped him build the bunker, but had to fight his way inside the bunker. And the whole story is around John Goodman plays Howard saying, you can't go out because it's either a chemical attack from the Russians or something worse from outer space, and you can't go out. Is he telling the truth, or is he a complete psychopath who just wants company whilst he's chosen to lock himself into a bunker for no good reasons?
Yeah, no, and from a psychological point of view, it's quite painful, isn't it, to actually see how it progresses and the sort of levels of tension rise. I mean, the standout moment for me was when Michelle effectively creates a chemical suit and a gas mask, so she wants to escape. And there's a sequence where she effectively inadvertently sets fire to the bunker, and you're underground, you're trapped underground, and the only way out is up through an air vent. And that sequence, as she's trying to get out, and that it's going to either burn the whole thing inside out or explode. That part from when she sets the fire inadvertently to getting out and and John Goodman trying to stop her as well, it's so tense. You really are on the edge of your seat.
For me, the one standout is the very first time John Goodman loses his temper. So maybe they're eating at the table, and I think perhaps out of sheer boredom, Michelle and Emmett are a bit playful, a bit cheeky, maybe take the mick out of him a bit, and they go too far, and he loses it. Yeah. And my God, the performance, and also because John Goodman is such a tall, large guy, his stature, he just towers those two and loses it. And I'm thinking, oh my God, and they're stuck with him in this bunker. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I like John Goodman a lot. He was in one of my favourite films of all time, which is called 𝗓𝗍 of Love, and which was a cop drama. He can play comedy, he can play sinister. I'm not sure what I thought about the ending again, Pascal, because obviously she does escape from the bunker, and probably the last 5 to 10 minutes of the film, that's when it becomes genuine Cloverfield, because then we have aliens chasing her across the fields, and we have spaceships trying to lift her up and take the car up into the spaceship. So it still just felt to me as if it was a bit tagged on at the end.
Yeah, and I think it's because also we spend, let's say, an hour and 20 minutes inside the bunker, and suddenly we're out. And it's almost like this overwhelming sense of space information and then the alien. I didn't mind it so much, and I think the reason why the ending worked okay, although I do agree with your point, is because at the very end, she's in the car, the radio's playing, and they talk about essentially most of the US being invaded by those creatures, and they're asking for help, and she chooses, because I think she has some knowledge around medical background, she chooses to go to a city that needs her help, and I feel it opens up to potentially more. But in terms of the the marketing, just to give us a quick link into that. Remember, we and I said there was no forewarning. The movie was released in March 2016, but the marketing started in January 2016. This is a 2-month campaign, Roger, and I can't wait to explore with you the elements to say, how do you make a 2-month campaign, which is incredibly short? How do you make it work?
Yeah, I mean, they obviously had the usual standards. There was a quite effective poster, actually. I love the idea of how they created the great big L of the word lane, almost implying down the poster that the fact that they were in this nuclear fallout bunker. I think that was very, very clever. And again, the trailers focused in on, that what you've already said, don't go out there, something's coming. They were very effective, but this particular campaign wasn't traditional at all. Beyond the poster, beyond the trailer, they did something totally different, and it was this viral campaign that you mentioned too before. And of course, the original Cloverfield film had an earlier sort of internet savvy campaign, but this one, they absolutely nailed it.
Absolutely. And the term viral marketing is used a lot in the world of marketing, and often is just this aspiration of creating content that others are going to share on. But actually, in the case of this film, and of course, I suspect with a strong influence from J.J. Abrams, he brought in some element of gamification, which I think must come from his work on Lost, where there was a lot of things you could do beyond watching the movie, to go online and find information about the airline and find information about the different characters, and of course, Cloverfield. So we begin with a discovery by really big fans of the genre that you could order the same kind of fizzy drink as the characters you could see on the trailer. So you've got some eagle-eyed fans who discover a real business where you can order the Swamp Pop soda that was featured in the film. And 3 things happen depending on who you were. So if you were lucky enough to be some of the first few 2 orders, not only did you get the soda and you can show off on lines, but you also got some pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that the characters were playing in the movie, leading to the legend that maybe that's why they can't finish the puzzle. Others got the sign saying, terribly sorry, due to unfortunate circumstances on the eastern seaboard, suggesting the monsters, we can't order, we can't deliver to you. And then others say, well, there's only 1 or 2 left, and the price is $4,813, which so happens to be the number that Howard, played by John Goodman, punches into the jukebox to play the song "I Think We're All On Now."
Yeah, and they also had this whole sort of you had to go out and find more information, didn't you? It's almost like a treasure hunt. You're looking for discovering the letters. Now, the Howard, that's the creepy character. He has a daughter called Megan, who we never actually meet in the show, and the implication is that he did something horrible to his daughter Megan. But you actually go out there and you can find letters that he had written to his daughter, expecting her to come back, and then details of the bunker he was building. And it almost like you could get involved in this character's life. And I imagine that appealed to quite a lot of people who just love putting clues together. And there's quite a lot of games you can get for iPhones and Androids these days, which are almost these clue-based games where you have to piece together, like escape rooms on phones, I guess. And that's like this, isn't it? You're just finding the information to piece together the story before you've even seen the film.
I love the way you use the term treasure hunt, because that's how it feels. And I'm absolutely convinced that it means that like you and I, because J.J. Abrams is of our age group, he will have played RPGs, he will have played Dungeons and Dragons and more, to come up with, because that's what you do. You have players around the table and you dish out, type messages, you dish out maps and so on. People went as far as going onto websites and using the mouse cursor, highlighting parts of the website to see whether there was a hidden hyperlink where if the website was in white, maybe the text was in white, and you can discover things like this. But the one that blew my mind in terms of just the prep, but also the discovery, was to find that at the movies, depending which chain you went to, they had 5 different trailers for the movie.
Yeah.
Each with a final frame being different. So you literally had to go online and freeze frame to the last frame. The last frame would reveal a hand drawing, a kind of some old-fashioned hand drawings, but also some numbers, and some clever so-and-so managed to pull the numbers together, being the coordinates to somewhere in the US where you could go, and someone went. It's on YouTube. They went into the coordinates, they dug the ground, and they found a box left allegedly by the character Howard.
Oh, that's just classic, isn't it? Absolutely. I mean, the fact that they did that and took the chance, I mean, that is quite a complicated load of information you've got to piece together to find those coordinates. The fact that they expected somebody, some incredible geek, to do that, it's the sort of thing you and I would have done, isn't it? To actually go and dig that box up. I mean, fabulous.
And why is it viral? Because then you end up with thousands upon thousands of people around the world, and indeed, also in Europe, where the movie did very well, discussing and getting excited about those clues. And people organize themselves in forums, and they go on fandom, they go on Reddit, they go on Facebook, they go on Twitter, and they talk about the marketing of the movie a lot more than they talk about the movie, because the movie has the trailers, you said, and they did do enough in terms of advertising, which was also a first in 2016 to spend so much money online as opposed to on TV and billboards and so on. But the one thing that has stayed from the 2008 campaign, Roger, was of course the reference to the 𝗪𝗏 company. Now, this is the infamous Japanese deep sea drilling companies that we think may be responsible for the appearance of the monster in the very first one. And you could, at the time, the website's still live, but there's a holding message. You could at the time go on this official website and discover more clues about Howard, the fact that he's worked for the company, which maybe suggests he knew more than he let on in the movie. And within that, you could discover more about him and his daughter and the messages they left on each other, almost like hackers. They were hidden away on websites. And back to this treasure hunt, I think it's absolutely amazing. And the very final clue before the movie was released was interesting, because this was played almost real time, Roger, where because the movie being released in March 2016, well, everything stops in March 2016, suggesting that for those who've seen the film, Howard obviously comes to a pretty painful end, and there's no more messages from him. But the last clue took you to a youth hostel in Chicago, where you could ring a number and hear more from Howard.
Yeah, I mean, do you think? I mean, it's such an immersive campaign, but incredibly detailed and obviously appealing to the geek fraternity. And I can't imagine your mainstream cinema goer, a family cinema goer, doing all of this. So it was definitely aimed at, people like us. But do you think that because it was so immersive and because it sucked you so much into the Cloverfield universe, do you think there was a lot of people who were disappointed when, like myself, they just felt actually the Cloverfield bit was tagged onto the end of just a film about a creepy guy in a nuclear bunker?
Possibly. I mean, to your point, they had to be careful not to alienate or simply, as we discussed literally last week about yesterday, where people missed the campaign altogether, very short, 2 months. So they did go ahead with a more pedestrian and straight off the mill trailer for TV and the Super Bowl ads. So literally, if you watch trailer number 3, the third one, it gives everything away. I mean, literally, it suggests you even get to hear the rumble, the monster, and the shadow looming at the end. So I think for me, it's probably the less exciting trailer. I think that the first 2 that they created for the campaign were very good. But you're right, they probably realized, hang on a minute, this is getting a bit too clever maybe, or a bit too elitist. So let's do something which is more mainstream. And that's when the TV and online adverts of a very, very kind of common trailer where there's a proper beginning, middle, and end, and you literally discover even through that trailer that 𝗏𝗏 escapes. You don't know what happens to her, but she escapes and is facing up to one of the monsters. So they probably had to do that very quickly at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. When she makes the decision to drive towards Houston, you almost think, yep, there could have been another film about Michelle after that. And of course, we haven't had it yet, and maybe we never will. So this was an interesting one this week, Pascal, because I don't think we've really come across a campaign like this before, a real detailed, almost painstakingly detailed viral marketing campaign appealing to the geeks out there who really love piecing together these bits of information, but at the same time running a parallel campaign which is more mainstream, posters, trailers, that sort of thing. So I think this is, whilst the film itself might not have lived up to the hype, I think the marketing campaign certainly did.
And it's a great addition to film marketing, because what you and I are trying to do, although we don't choose the movies for the campaign, we choose the movies because we like them or we think something to say, we do try and make sure that we extract elements of the campaign that can be a source of inspiration for all of you and listeners, and they can take that away into the world of business and entertainment, no matter your profession. And I am so pleased because this being number 48, I would say, I would agree with you, this is the first proper viral campaign that we've discussed.
Let's hope we're going to experience many more of these in the years to come. So Pascal, once again, fantastic to share some time with you here on the screen and here in the audio studio. Two Geeks in a Marketing Podcast, episode 48. Thank you everyone for watching the show. Thank you everyone who listened to the show. As always, let us know what you think about Two Geeks in a Marketing Podcast. Give us some feedback on the YouTube channel. Look for us on Twitter. We're both there. And tell us which films you'd like us to talk about. Tell us which films you want us to talk about from the point of view that they're really good films, but also from the point of view of the marketing campaigns. Until the next episode, please, all of you, go out there and make sure that your marketing is done right. I was Roger Edwards and he was Pascal Fintoni.